hppodcraft.com.
If heaven ever wishes to grant me a boon, it will be a total effacing of the results of a mere chance which fixed my eye on a certain stray piece of shelf paper.
Here we are at the third chapter of the Call of Cthulhu. This chapter, of course, called
The Madness from the Sea.
We? Who is we?
We. That's me, Chad Pfeiffer.
And me, Andrew Leman.
And who are you, sir?
Oh, and I guess that would be me, Chris Ike.
Well, what do you know?
Met again.
It seems we're all here again, guys, for the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
At hppodcraft.com.
This is, of course, the third part in our ongoing three-part series on the H.P. Lovecraft story, The Call of Cthulhu. We find our protagonist has mostly given up on the Cthulhu cult.
He's taken it as far as he can take it.
Exactly.
He has followed every lead as far as he can take it.
Well, I mean, as far as he knows, it's the end of the story. That's it.
Until
Until he comes across this shelf paper that he mentioned in that quote there. Basically, he's examining reserved mineral species at a friend's collection or museum.
Yeah, curator of a local museum and a mineralogist of note. Lovecraft had a good friend, James Morton, who was a mineralogist at the Patterson Museum in New Jersey. And supposedly, he is the guy that first turned Lovecraft on to Algernon Blackwood.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Lovecraft mentioned it in one of his letters that Morton, James Morton, said, hey, I love this guy, you should read him. And so he read him, and obviously he quoted him at the beginning of the story, so he thinks he's pretty cool.
So he's helping, I mean, what is he doing? He's just wrapping up some things or unwrapping
I think the idea is that the mineralogist friend has received a shipment of mineral specimens that are all wrapped up in just wadded up old newspaper, which to the people who did the wrapping was just trash, packing material.
Right, exactly.
And as he's unwrapping these stones, he lays eyes on a piece of newspaper from Australia.
And this piece of paper is a clipping from the Sydney Bulletin, April 18th, 1925.
And he can't help but recognize the photograph of a certain statue that is shown in the newspaper.
It's a picture of an idol, very much like the one Inspector Legras had brought to that meeting of archaeologists, and that our narrator has actually seen in person. The headline says, and I'll read it like it sounds in my head:
Mystery derelict found at sea. Vigilance arrives with helpless armed New Zealand yacht in tow. One survivor and dead man found aboard. Tale of desperate battle and deaths at sea. Rescued seaman refuses particulars of strange experience. Odd idol found in his possession. Inquiry to follow.
Which is a very comprehensive headline.
Yeah, that's a really great headline.
But in Lovecraft's defense, back in the 20s, they really wrote much more comprehensive headlines than they write today. That practice of headlines and then sub-headlines that sort of give you the gist of the entire story in the headline, that was actually pretty common.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a short article. Basically, it just says that a freighter called Vigilant arrived in Sydney towing the battled and disabled steam yacht, which was called the Alert, and had been recovered on April 12th, having one living and one dead man. The Vigilant had left Valparaiso on March 25th, but was thrown off course by heavy storms and monster waves, which is what brought it across the Alert.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When they recovered the Alert, the living man aboard was clutching the idol pictured in this article, and he was half delirious.
Yeah. Right. He had a strange story of piracy and slaughter, is what he said, or what the newspaper said. And his name was Gustav Johansen, or Norwegian.
Yes, he's a Norwegian. He's the second mate of a schooner called Emma.
Out of New Zealand.
And that had been sailing for Peru with 11 men aboard, and it was also thrown way off course by storms that came across the Alert.
Right.
The Alert is this ship that was manned by Pacific Islanders, the Kanakas, and they ordered the Emma to turn back from the course that they had been thrown onto. And the captain, Captain Collins of the Emma, refused to do so. And the people on the Alert opened fire.
Right.
Like immediately.
They had, for a yacht, it was surprisingly well armed.
A battery of brass cannons.
And they actually, because they're the aggressors, they do some pretty serious damage to the Emma, and it starts to sink. But the men, Captain Collins and his men on board, they jump off. They board the Alert.
Quite valiantly.
Yeah, and they fight the men on the Alert, and they kill every single last one of them.
Hand to hand.
Yeah.
It's a pretty brutal scene, which is why it's not in the movie.
I actually... When I was reading this, I thought, wow, if we'd had a little more budget, could have had
or really any,
could have had a great Captain Blood style sea battle.
That would have been awesome. And if there had been room in our garage to stage that scene, we would have done it.
Yeah.
The captain and the first mate, unfortunately, are killed in this fight. So the remaining 8 sailors are now under Johansson.
Right.
And since their ship is sinking, the Emma, they take over the Alert. And they're inquisitive men. They continue in this direction. Even though they were thrown off course, they continue in this direction because they want to know why the folks on the Alert had told them to turn back.
Yeah, and we're willing to kill them.
They find the log of the Alert, and their curiosity is piqued by what they find in the log, and they determine that they're going to go, follow it up.
Right.
They mentioned later in the story that they felt like it was almost a duty for them to kill these men aboard the Alert.
Because they were so almost not even human.
Yeah, or Johansson is kind of shocked later when they go before a board of inquiry and they get in trouble for killing them all so ruthlessly. And he's almost like, it wasn't ruthless, it was almost merciful. These people should have died.
You would have done the same.
Yeah.
But those bloodthirsty Norwegians.
They love boarding ships and killing folks. In their blood. The next day on the Alert, they keep the course and they land on some island. Although there isn't supposed to be an island out there.
There's nothing on the charts.
And what we know from the article is that 6 of the men died there. Johansson won't say much more. He says they all fell into a chasm. That's basically what happened. He and his companion, William Bryden, they got back aboard the Alert from this island, but were again beaten about by the storm that took place on April 2nd. And Johansson doesn't remember anything, really, of what happened in that period until they were rescued. He didn't even know, apparently, that his companion had died.
Now, the storm in question was on April 2nd, did you say?
Yes.
And isn't that date significant somehow?
That is the dream, the earthquake, actually.
That's the same date as the earthquake and Wilcox's dreams and so many other things that our narrator, Thurston, has identified in the newspapers.
Right. Now, all the article mentions about the Alert and that group of men who were all killed aboard it is that they had a bad reputation in their port. They were actually known for taking trips in the night into the woods, this crew. Never trust anybody who goes into the woods at night for any reason. And when there were these initial earthquakes and tremors in March 1st, they said, we got to get to sea. And that crew jumped aboard the Alert and they took off as soon as those earthquakes and tremors happened. So they knew something was going on. And like you say, these dates, they all correspond with the stuff from Wilcox when he began dreaming and then when he had the really terrible psychotic break.
Right.
This little piece of info that our narrator sees in this paper clipping that he comes across accidentally.
It knocks his socks off.
It drives him nuts, man. It finally just puts a little pin in all of that pieces of information we've gotten over the last 2 chapters.
Because it's the independent corroboration of everything that it's like the world is reaching out to him and saying, look, this is actually happening.
Exactly. And he enters on full-on adventure archaeologist
mode. He turns into Cthulhu investigator.
Yeah, he does. He starts globetrotting, in fact, to get more information.
He takes a train to San Francisco, and then he takes a boat to New Zealand.
Right, and he wants to learn more about the waterfront scum who ran the Alert from the people there. And that's where he finds out, more that the people... All they really say about this crew is that they made those trips to the woods and that they sometimes saw red glare out there and heard some faint drumming when they went into the woods. So it seems as if the crew of this ship is just like those other cults in New Orleans and the Eskimo.
And then he wants to, talk to Johansson, but Johansson, he finds out, went back to Norway with his yellow hair turned white.
Yeah, he went. The fear was too much and it turned his hair white. I love that. See, the story has everything.
Yep.
That's great. He sold his cottage there in New Zealand and he split for Oslo with his wife. And he manages to get the address while he's there. Then he goes to Sydney, to see the Alert. There's nothing really too particular about that.
It's been cleaned up. There's no real evidence left of the Alert, but he sees what there is to see.
Yeah.
But then he wants to see the statue.
Right.
So he goes to the museum in Hyde Park, where he gets a chance to see the second of the Cthulhu idols.
And it's that same crazy material, and he thinks of Castro saying that they came from the stars and had brought their images with them when he's looking at it. So things are starting to add up.
So, man, this guy, what's he hoping to find out? This would have me pretty scared. I don't know if I would have even ventured out of the country to go check this stuff out.
Really?
Oh yeah. Crazy? This is horrific, man.
He's in so deep, though. He's got to get to the bottom of the mystery.
Well, but also, Thurston has seen a lot of. Thurston's seen a lot of scary newspaper clippings and heard some scary stories. And interviewed some creepy guys. But Thurston has not himself seen the body strung up in the swamp.
Right.
He has not himself, encountered directly face-to-face any of these horrible things. So to him, it's still a fascinating puzzle. And because it seems to have engulfed his uncle and that kind of stuff, I think that's why he can't let it go. He wants to follow it through.
Yeah, it's the unanswered questions about his uncle, I guess, that really is driving him. And maybe he's hoping to find out who maybe actually killed him.
He goes to Oslo after that via London, and he goes to see Johansson, but the guy's dead.
Yeah.
And how did Johansson die?
Right. His wife tells him that he's dead and that he'd been out on a walk through the docks, and a bunch of papers fell out of a window and knocked him down. 2 East Indian sailors help him up, but by the time an ambulance comes, he's dead.
Right.
Whoa.
So Johansson dies in a manner that's eerily similar to the way Professor Angel himself died.
Exactly.
Strange nautical-looking guys bump into you, and that's curtains.
Yeah.
Now, Johansson's wife actually doesn't know too much about what happened out on that island. He didn't reveal too much to her, but he did keep a journal for technical matters. It's written in English.
Which she doesn't speak.
She doesn't speak English, so luckily
She's
she
like
was
the only person in Norway who doesn't.
Right. We love, by the way, can I just say we love our Norwegian
We
fans?
Absolutely.
I say we love
My good
our
friend
friends in
Jason
Norway.
Woodburn lives in Norway, and Jason Woodburn is the guy that turned me on to H.P. Lovecraft. So there you go.
Let's say thank you to Norway.
Thank you, Norway.
Thank you,
You went
Norway.
out there to visit him, didn't you?
I did. I've been in Norway. Yeah, I went up to Lillehammer to go visit him, and it's well, I was in Oslo for a bit too. But yeah, it's a great country. It's beautiful. Everybody should go.
Except don't walk down by the docks if you read this story.
Yeah.
And if you do, keep your eyes open. Yes. You could be in trouble real quick.
Well, our narrator manages on his visit to Oslo to persuade this wife to give him the technical matters journal. I don't know what kind of spiel he gives her that has her handing this over, but she does it, and he starts to go through it. And it's poorly written account of what actually really happened. So now we're really getting into the meat of the story. It tells of the earthquake and storms that threw the Emma off course, and it tells about the way that they felt they needed to exterminate the men aboard the Alert, and it tells about how the city rose from the murk when they continued sailing aboard the Alert.
I suppose that only a single mountaintop, the hideous monolith-crowned citadel whereon great Cthulhu was buried, actually emerged from the waters. When I think of the extent of all that may be brooding down there, I almost wish to kill myself forthwith. Johansson and his men were awed by the cosmic majesty of this dripping Babylon of elder demons, and must have guessed without guidance that it was nothing of this or of any sane planet. Awe at the unbelievable size of the greenish stone blocks, at the dizzying height of the great carven monolith, and at the stupefying identity of the colossal statues and bas-reliefs with the queer image found in the shrine on the Alert, is poignantly visible in every line of the mate's frightened description.
Wow.
He goes on to say that Johansson kind of just describes the angles of the place, and he talks a bit about futurism.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, it tries to show the dynamism of things.
Yeah, it's super angular and super abstract, and it is an attempt to sort of capture the feel of motion and chaos and sort of overlapping planes of color, and
Right.
it's really cool looking.
What was it? Part of the whole is it post-impressionism?
It comes out of World War I think, mostly. And,
Right.
You know, sort of the shakeup of the whole worldview that World War I precipitated.
Yeah, and it even, it sort of deals with, I think the reason it's called futurism is it deals with a lot of modern technological things. A lot of futuristic paintings will be of trains or, fast-moving
Machinery, industrial images.
Right.
and-
Back about the city that they found, he talks about how strange angles that Wilcox was talking about in his dreams sort of places this
Right.
stuff together. And he says what he saw was abnormal non-Euclidean, which is, I think, the first time that Lovecraft uses non-Euclidean.
So these geometrically, and the reason that he references futurism is because when Johansson is looking at this place, it just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
The geometry of it, the shapes, the way they fit together, the way that the depth of things seems to work, it's just not right.
Yeah.
You don't know whether you're...
Yeah, up or down.
Up
you
or
can't
down.
tell which direction is which. You can't tell whether you're standing sideways or vertical, or
Yeah.
it's crazy. It messes with your head and your perception, and you can't comprehend what you're looking at.
That is terrifying.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So they park the boat, they pull up, they climb up over these slippery blocks that are jutting out of the water. And they're all gripped by fear instinctively, just sort of like I was when we were discussing the geography of this place. And I think they're just looking around for some kind of souvenir to take.
Right.
And just to get away. And it's Rodriguez, the Portuguese,
Right.
who finds the immense carven door that has these squid-like bas-relief sculptures around it that are very similar to what we've seen elsewhere in the story. I mean, they think it's a door.
Yeah.
It's all crazily arranged.
Yeah, and it's huge. I mean, if it's a door, it's really, really big.
Right. I mean, it's just sort of this gargantuan they call it the Great Acre Panel. So really, it's
yeah.
like this gigantic football field panel. And naturally, they start goofing with it, which they probably shouldn't have done. they press over on all sorts of places.
Well,
like,
it's also surprisingly easy to open, as it turns out, for something that's that big.
It's Bryden.
A sailor.
Bryden just kind of comes up and pushes on a stone, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, or there's Donovan and Bryden are just both pushing around and goofing on it. And
Next thing you know,
they find some kind of balanced switch. or
yeah,
something.
he implies that the whole thing is balanced on some sort of pivot point, and all they have to do is really apply just a little bit of force to one end, and suddenly the whole thing starts wheeling into motion. It's kind of like the secret panel in the church, or it's the sort of thing
something One-Eyed Willie built.
Exactly. Or, the ancient Aztecs or something. How did they get all those fancy pneumatic things to fire those arrows?
Yeah.
And the gears and everything. That was pretty elaborate stuff. Somehow or another they engineered this thing. Yeah.
One-Eyed Willie. So the panel slides away diagonally, or somehow it makes no sense, and it reveals this aperture.
The aperture was black with a darkness almost material. That tenebrousness was indeed a positive quality, for it obscured such parts of the inner walls as ought to have been revealed, and actually burst forth like smoke from its eon-long imprisonment, visibly darkening the sun as it slunk away into the shrunken and gibbous sky on flapping membranous wings. The odor arising from the newly opened depths was intolerable, and at length the quick-eared Hawkins thought he heard a nasty, slopping sound down there. Everyone listened, and everyone was listening still when it lumbered slobberingly into sight and gropingly squeezed its gelatinous green immensity through the black doorway into the tainted outside air of that poisoned city of madness.
Yeah.
There it is.
That's an entrance.
That is an entrance.
They really screwed up.
These guys have it coming. If you see you're on a boat, you come across a city with non-Euclidean geometry, you don't go anywhere near it. You just get back on the boat and go.
Well, these are seafaring men by their nature. They're explorers,
and they're crazed with the bloodlust of just having killed every single member of the crew of the Alert. So they're feeling invincible right now.
Yeah, exactly. What it says in the story, it says,
"The stars were right again, and what an age-old cult had failed to do by design, a band of innocent sailors had done by accident. After vigintillions of years, great Cthulhu was loose again, and ravening for delight."
I love that passage.
Yeah.
Vigintillions? That's amazing.
That's a long time.
That is a very long time. I actually don't know how long that is.
It's 1,000 decillion, which doesn't... number of zeros. Here we go. 63. It has 63 zeros.
63 zeros. Wow.
That's a lot of zeros, man.
Yeah. So, it's been a long time since he's gotten up, and he is ravening for delights.
Yeah, he's ready to party.
And coffee.
Maybe to take a leak. Well, so Cthulhu is loose again.
3 men were swept up by the flabby claws before anybody turned. God rest them, if there be any rest in the universe. They were Donovan, Guerrera, and Angstrom. Parker slipped as the other 3 were plunging frenziedly over endless vistas of green-crusted rock to the boat, and Johansen swears he was swallowed up by an angle of masonry which shouldn't have been there. An angle which was acute, but behaved as if it were obtuse. So only Bryden and Johansen reached the boat and pulled desperately for the Alert as the mountainous monstrosity flopped down the slimy stones and hesitated floundering at the edge of the water.
So yeah, Chris, that was you.
Parker.
Yeah, I was Parker. I fell into that angle, and let me tell you, it was terrifying.
So I don't know if we've ever actually made mention of that on the podcast before, but if you see the film, The Call of Cthulhu, the fella falling into the pit, the angled pit, that is Chris Lackey.
The pit that should have been obtuse but behaved, should have been acute but behaved as if it were obtuse, just like Chris himself.
Man. It's pretty fun. Somebody on the forums, I don't remember who, mentioned something about ravenous cougars, and I knew that they had seen the extras footage on the DVD
right.
because I made some reference to there being
cougars hidden under
cougar
the set.
down. Oh right, yeah, because Robertson was giving me a hard time because
right.
I wouldn't fall. I was really nervous about falling backwards into this
right.
thing, and he just was calling me a big wimp because he's like, there's a foot of padding down there, but there was also nails and just hardwood and all types of different things. I'm going to defend myself right now. And then I also said that there was a hungry cougar that was tied up at the bottom, and that's my claim to fame. That's it.
Yeah, that is absolutely it. But this is a monster chase. I mean, there's a giant monster chase.
There is a very large monster chase.
That's amazing.
And killing.
Yeah, and he's gobbling them up.
And he has quite a reach as well. Yeah, he's a big fella.
Wow. It's amazing that he just woke up after vigintillion years and just started beating ass right away. I mean, he just started destroying guys. So the two sailors, they managed to escape and get to the boat, get the steam engine going again, and they haul out of there as quickly as they can. And Lovecraft describes Cthulhu as being like Polypheme cursing the fleeing ship of Odysseus. He used that description in Dagon as well, the polyphemus kind of connection to the Odyssey.
Oh, right, yeah.
So that's
which
clearly
is the
another one of
Cyclops.
those influences. Yeah, which is the Cyclops.
Yeah, that's the name of the Cyclops.
That Odysseus tricks.
Odysseus tricks and blinds.
Yeah.
So, of course, Cthulhu comes after them. Going away on a ship isn't going to keep this.
Hello, he can swim.
Exactly. It says he slid greasily into the water.
Yeah.
Ugh. That's so terrible. Bryden looks back as he slides greasily into the water.
And that's it.
Pursuing them.
That's a
it
mistake for Bryden.
Yeah,
He's
big
done.
Mistake. He goes mad and he starts laughing.
He laughs to death.
Yeah. He continues laughing until he dies. It's an interesting thing. I mean, what is it that's making him laugh so hard when he goes mad?
The joke of existence.
Yeah, the perception of how we all are.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, no, I think he
really
just got
do is
the
laugh.
ultimate joke. He's like, oh, wait a minute. All those things I thought were so important and that meant things mean nothing. Hilarious.
But Johansson hadn't given out yet.
Knowing that the thing could surely overtake the Alert until steam was fully up, he resolved on a desperate chance. And setting the engine for full speed, ran lightning-like on deck and reversed the wheel. There was a mighty eddying and foaming in the noisome brine, and as the steam mounted higher and higher, the brave Norwegian drove his vessel head-on against the pursuing jelly, which rose above the unclean froth like the stern of a demon galleon. The awful squid head with writhing feelers came nearly up to the bowsprit of the sturdy yacht, but Johansson drove on relentlessly. There was a bursting as of an exploding bladder, a slushy nastiness as of a cloven sunfish, a stench as of 1,000 opened graves, and a sound that the chronicler would not put on paper. For an instant, the ship was befouled by an acrid and blinding green cloud, and then there was only a venomous seething astern, where, God in heaven, the scattered plasticity of that nameless sky spawn was nebulously recombining in its hateful original form, whilst its distance widened every second as the Alert gained impetus from its mounting steam.
So he rams him.
He rammed Cthulhu.
Johansson rams him with the boat, and then he kind of pops like a balloon almost. That's crazy.
That is crazy.
I mean, they do foreshadow it a little bit earlier when Castro says these things
have
appear.
no real physical form
Right.
and can take many shapes.
Yeah. I mean, they have
Right,
shape,
yeah,
but
yeah.
they're not flesh and blood as you or I know it.
Right.
That's a pretty brave thing he did there, though.
Well, desperate.
Well, I mean, how many options did he really have?
Yeah, I guess you're right. Well, I mean, just keep steaming away and close your eyes and cry. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you're right. He pulled it together and was like, you know what, I'm going to be proactive about this and try and ram this monster. Maybe it'll do something. And it did.
Now, not to be a downer at all, but this passage does contain the one bit of description that has always struck me as a little goofy, and that is a cloven sunfish. That is a little, as of a cloven sunfish. That's a metaphor that has always sort of escaped me. I guess I don't know that much about sunfish or cleaving them, but
A slushy nastiness as of a cloven sun.
I don't know what it is about sunfish that's particularly nasty.
Yeah, it
or
kinda sticks
Yeah, why,
out. I mean,
why is a sunfish more nasty than any other
than a
fish that's been cut
catfish or
Right.
any other kind of fish.
open? And sunfish, it sounds so pleasant.
I mean, sunfish are big. That's the only thing I can think of. Is that sunfish are bigger than your average fish? But
We should put a picture up of a sunfish on for the show notes. Give a link to
Yeah.
it, and people could.
Yeah, let's have
it's
everybody
actually
weigh
pretty
in on
creepy looking.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Johansson, he had quite an experience, so maybe some odd images are popping into his head.
perhaps,
And,
no doubt.
Yeah.
Not sitting in judgment over
And
Johansson's.
he's sort of insensible after that conflict, and then we know what happens to him from our newspaper clipping. That he
Right.
gets picked up, and he eventually, his hair goes white, and he dies.
Under suspicious circumstances on the docks of
Yeah.
Oslo.
Uh huh.
So, having discovered all of these things that have happened, and having discovered that all of his uncle's researches point to this real incident, our narrator concludes the entire tale with this.
That was the document I read. And now I have placed it in the tin box beside the bas-relief and the papers of Professor Angel. With it shall go this record of mine, this test of my own sanity, wherein is pieced together that which I hope may never be pieced together again. I have looked upon all that the universe has to hold of horror, and even the skies of spring and the flowers of summer must ever afterward be poison to me. But I do not think my life will be long. As my uncle went, as poor Johansen went, so I shall go. I know too much, and the cult still lives. Cthulhu still lives too, I suppose. Again in that chasm of stone which has shielded him since the sun was young. His accursed city is sunken once more, for the Vigilant sailed over the spot after the April storm. But his ministers on earth still bellow and prance and slay around idol-capped monoliths in lonely places. He must have been trapped by the sinking whilst within his black abyss, or else the world would by now be screaming with fright and frenzy. Who knows the end? What has risen may sink, and what has sunk may rise. Loathsomeness waits and dreams in the deep, and decay spreads over the tottering cities of men. A time will come, but I must not and cannot think. Let me pray that if I do not survive this manuscript, my executors may put caution before audacity and see that it meets no other eye. Which, of course, they don't do because we're reading it.
Exactly.
Oh no! Now we're gonna get it.
Exactly.
Oh man!
And that is the end of the story.
That is the end of the story. Man, I can't express enough how much I love the story. It's just, it's all magic. I love it. Even the sunfish.
I do find it odd that he wouldn't just burn all of this stuff himself or get rid of it or destroy it himself. Why does he have to rely on the executors of his items or his objects to take care of it?
Well, maybe they...
why would he want to pass on this?
I don't know. Maybe he hopes that they'll have the resources to somehow combat this cult. You know, that maybe there's, somebody will find it that will be in a position of power that they can do something about it.
Yeah.
We don't really, we know that Thurston is predicting his own imminent demise because he knows too much, but we don't actually know what happens to Thurston.
True. No. And maybe he's just hanging on to it because he wants it, but in the event that he does die, he hopes people will be smart enough to take care of it.
He puts his own written down thing in the same box with all the other evidence and then locks it away. But I think the implication is that his predictions have come true and that he's dead, and the only reason we are now reading this document is because he's dead.
Of course. Yeah.
But
okay, so he didn't, because he died under probably mysterious circumstances, he wasn't able to destroy this himself.
Right, and he didn't have a chance to warn anybody. Don't read what's in the, we are in exactly the position he was in at the beginning of the story. Where, somebody dies under mysterious circumstances, and we find the key to the strange box, and oh boy, it starts all over again.
This is the best story. It's got the best ideas. It's the most well written. It's inspiring. It gives me ideas and thoughts. It really builds this world and takes you into it, and it feels so real. And I think that's what Lovecraft was trying to capture with all of his other stories, specifically like the Shunned House, where he took all these historical events and tried to weave them into this story to make it. And he just failed with that, in my opinion. But this, he knocks it out of the park, man. It's so good.
Yeah, it really is.
It is extremely accessible in a way that most of his other stories aren't. It's really easy to identify with the narrator's voice with Francis Wayland Thurston.
Right.
You really feel like, and especially because the baton is quite literally passed to the reader. You really do feel like, you yourself could be next. It is that sort of where, the horrors in the story really do reach out, and you do feel like you yourself have gotten yourself in some trouble by having read this story by the time it's done.
So good.
Yeah.
I love it.
However, I don't think the editor of Weird Tales loved it at first, did he?
No, he didn't. Good old Farnsworth Wright. Lovecraft wrote this in the summer of 26, but Farnsworth, was, he didn't want anything to do with it. And he hasn't really published anything of Lovecraft since that whole incident with the Love Dead, that whole thing that happened. And then Lovecraft's friend and fellow writer, Donald Wandrei, went to Farnsworth, and Wandrei wrote a book called Lovecraft in Providence. And I'll just read this passage for you. I casually worked in a reference to a story, The Call of Cthulhu, that Lovecraft was revising and finishing, and which I thought was a wonderful tale. But I added that for some reason or another, Lovecraft had talked about submitting it to other magazines. I said I just couldn't understand why he was apparently planning to bypass weird tales unless he was seeking to broaden his markets or widen his reading public. None of this was true, but I could see that my fanciful account took effect in the way that Wright began to fidget and show signs of agitation, for he rose and paced around his office. So there you go.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Way to go, Donald.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Well
Donald.
done, sir. Yeah, that's great. So he kind of did a little, almost like a little Tom Sawyer kind of thing on Farnsworth. And Farnsworth goes, what? Other people are interested? Maybe I should publish this. And then he does, and it's great.
So that reminds me of I had a friend who tried to quit a job once, and he just didn't really want to say why he was quitting. So he told them, I got offered another job at a ridiculous salary, thinking that he would then get fired. And they said, okay, we'll meet the salary. He just made up this thing that he wound up making the ridiculous stuff. It's almost like good agenting, Well, he's got a lot of other offers, so you've got to act now.
So it finally appeared in the February 1928 issue of Weird Tales.
It's been great fun discussing this story.
And it's the sort of story that we could continue discussing for several more hours.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
well, it would just be fanboy fawning at some point.
That's kind of what it's been so far. So,
Not too many pot shots.
but you know what? I'm not going to apologize for that.
Yeah.
That's the reason that hey, look, we went through a lot of stories to get here. It's really a great story, and I've had a lot of fun talking about it with you guys. I want to thank Andrew again for joining us.
Andrew, thank
Thanks
you so
for
much.
letting me. My pleasure entirely.
And of course, thank you for your excellent reading. I want to thank Reber Clark for the great music.
So next week, we're not just going to do one black bottle. We're going to do two black bottles.
2 black bottles. That's the next story.
That's the next story, and it's he did it with Wilfred Blanche Talman, and not to be confused with Wilfred Brimley.
That should be an interesting show. That's all we have for now. I'm Chad Pfeiffer.
I'm Chris Lackey.
And I'm Andrew Leman
And this has been the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
at hppodcraft.com.
And then Chris, you scream.
Ah!
hppodcraft.com.